Hello guys, welcome back to this series on C programming. In this video, we will outline what we learned in the previous video from video 1 to video 8 by doing some exercises together. So before starting this video, I advise you to watch the previous ones to get the basic theoretical notion. So let's start together. Let's go to our dev program. We create a new file. We register it for sure. So exercise 1. The first thing that we have to do is to write the basic structure of C programming. Exercise 1. In this exercise, we will print an integer entered by user from keyboard. It's a simple exercise. We will start by simple one. So, the first thing, printf, we have to ask the user to write a number. Please enter a number. Now, scanf. So now the user will enter the number. We will enter an integer, so it must be %d and address number. Here we are using a number, a variable. So the first thing here that we have to do the declaration of number. So declaration here, I add a comment just to explain this step. We have here the type number. Okay, we cannot add the value of number, for example 10. Why? Because we are asking the user to enter this number from keyboard, so we don't have to enter the number of this variables. After insert the number, we have to display this number on the screen. So here, display the number. I wrote here a comment. How to display number? As we explained it already in the previous video, display by using printf. So the number, the value of number is 2 points. We have number. Sorry. So here, this program, I will explain again, is to print an integer entered by the user, not in the program. So the first thing, we will use a variable. So we declare the variable here. The type of the variable, the declaration of the variable is to give the type and the name. So here we give the type, it's integer. The name is number. You can give the name that you want. The first thing, we have to ask the user to enter the number. So please, the message here that will appear on the screen, please enter a number. Scanf %d address number. So %d, it's related to the type of the variable. Our type is integer, so it will be %d. And after, we have to tell the compiler where to write this entered number. So it will be memorized in the address of the variable number. After that, we have to display this number by using printf. The value of number is, and we write the number of the value. Let's execute together. We will see the result. So here, the execution is doing line by line. So the first line of our program int number, so the computer or the compiler will go to the memory and create a variable type int and number. After this line, the compiler will execute this line. Printf, please enter a number. So we will see on the screen, please enter a number, as you can see here. Now, the compiler is waiting for our number. So here, for example, 20. After we enter the number here, it will be registered or memorized in number in this variable. And after printf, we will print the value that we entered inside the number. So we have here the value of number is, here we forget, we didn't get the value here. Why? Because to get the value of a number, we have to add the %d. So here we have to add %d. Let's execute again. Enter the number 20. The value of number is 20. So to enter the number by keyboard or by user, we have to use %d. To display this value also, we have to use %d to get the value of our variables. Now we will pass to the second example or second exercise. Let's create a file. Copy the structure. Register our example. Exercise 2. The second exercise is to write a C program to add two integers. So the first thing here, we will take two numbers from user. After, we will add the value of these two numbers. So the first thing here, how many variables we need? For the moment, we need, let's say we need 2 variables. Because after, we will add another one. I will explain why. Here, we will ask the user to add 2 numbers. Please enter 2 numbers. Here, we will use multiple variables in the same line. We are going to use the same line. We are not going to ask the user to enter numbers separately. We can use both. It's not a problem, but this one is faster. Scanf. So we have 2 numbers, %d and %d. Address number 1 and address number 2. So here we are going to enter 2 numbers. The first number will be registered in number 1. The second number will be registered in number 2. Until here we have our 2 numbers. Okay, so now let me write here entering 2 numbers. Here now what do we have to do? We have 2 numbers. We have to calculate the sum. We have to do the addition of those 2 numbers. So sum calculating. So we have to do number 1 plus number 2. But here, number 1 plus number 2, the sum of number 1 plus number 2 must be registered memorizing in another variable. We cannot get the value of the sum of those 2 numbers if we don't memorize it in another place. So here, what do we have to do? We have to register the sum of those 2 numbers in another variable. So here I have to add the variable sum in the declaration. Here I use a new variables. So I have to declare it before using it. So we have sum, it's equal to number 1 plus number 2. So now the sum of those 2 numbers is memorized in sum. Now what I have to do, I have to print the sum. Print the sum of 2 numbers. So we have printf the sum of 2 numbers is % sum. Okay, so here we have 3 steps. We enter the numbers, we calculate the sum, we display the sum. Let's execute. The first number 10, the second one 2. So we have the sum of 2 numbers is 12. Okay, it's so simple. You have just to think logically. We have 2 numbers to add, so we have to keep the result in something, somewhere. So we have to keep it in new variables. Okay, that's why we create a new variable that we call it sum. Now we will pass to the third example. Third exercise. I'm just copying the structure to be faster. Save as. Here we have exercise 3. So exercise 3 is to calculate the multiplication of two floating numbers. Okay, we are going now to use float, not integer. We did 2 examples with integer, with this type integer. Now we will try to apply another type, which is float. So here, the first thing, same logic as previous example. We have to take those two float numbers from user. So we have float, for example, number 1, number 2, printf. We will ask the user to enter two numbers, two float numbers. Let's specify. We are going to take those numbers by using %f, %f, and we have address, number 1, and address, number 2. So here we took two numbers from user. Now we will calculate the product. Calculate the product. It's the same logic as the previous example. To calculate the multiplication of two numbers, we have to create another variable in which we will keep the result of this multiplication. So we have here, for example, product. The name of my variable is product. It's equal to number 1 multiplied by number 2. Here I used a new variable. The first thing that I have to do, I have to declare this variable. So the product of two float will be float. Now we will display the result. Printf result is %f product. Let's execute our example. Enter a number, for example 2.5, and I will enter 2. The result is 5. Let me execute again. I think we have, yes, here we have a space. That's why we something was not clear. Let me execute again. For example, 2.5 and 2.5. The result is 6.25. Let's verify. 6.25. It's okay, just to verify, to be sure that our example is good. So here we declare the variable here. We took the variable from user, we calculate the product, we display the result. Now we will go to the last exercise in this video. Let's save our exercise. Exercise 4. We will save. Here the exercise is to swap numbers to swap the value of two numbers, okay, by using temporary variables. What do we mean by that? Here, let me create a word to explain to you exactly the idea of this example. So here, this famous table, it's very important to understand. So I advise you always to use this table, the memory of the computer. Exactly, this table represents the memory of the computer. So we have type, we have name, and we have value. This is exactly when we create variables, it will be like that in the memory. For example, we have int number 1, the value, for example, 20, and we have int number 2, and we have, for example, 10. Okay, when I took a number from users, like for example, int number 1 is equal to 20, it will come here to the memory, it will be registered in the memory of the computer, okay? Now, what is this exercise? The exercise is to swap two numbers. Swapping two numbers is to change the values of two numbers. For example, here, number 1 is 20, number 2 is 10. I want to swap. So, here, I want to swap those two values. Here, number 1, it will be 10, number 2, it will be 20. So I will swap the values of two numbers. Now, the idea, how we are going to do this example. So here it was the initial value was 20 and 10. Okay, how we are going to do this? Imagine that you have two things to change. Okay, the first thing, you have to keep the value of these numbers, change the value of the second and the first, and after give the value of the first number to the second. So here we cannot come exactly and do number 1 will take the value of number 2. If you will do like that, 10, okay, now we lost the value of number 1. We have to give the value of number 1 to number 2, but we lost it already. So the first thing, what do we have to do? We have to keep the value of number 1 somewhere, change the value. For example, here I will create another variable, int number 3. Okay, number 3, I will keep in number 3 this value of number 1. So we have number 3 equal to number 1. When I will do like that in the program, int number 3 will take the number 1 here. What will happen in the memory? It will be int number 3. After number 3 will take the value of number 1. So what is the value of number 1 is 20. So number 3 will be 20. Now I can change, no problem. Now I can give the value of number 2 to number 1. So when I will write number 1 will take the value of number 2, it's not a problem because I already keep the value of number 1. So number 1 will take the value of number 2. This is 10. Now number 1 must be giving to number 2. The value of number 1, it's already registered here to number 3. So here number 1 is equal to number 3. So here it will be 20. I hope the idea is clear. I will repeat again. Here I have number 1 equal to 10, number 2 equal to 20. Now I need to swap the values of those two numbers. The first thing, I have to keep the value of number 1 in another variables. After giving the value of number 2 to number 1, and after number 1 will take the value that we already registered in number 3. Let's go to dev and try to do this exercise. If the idea is clear, doing it in depth is so simple. So the first thing here, int number 1, number 2. As we said, we are going to use 3 numbers. Printf please enter. We will do it separately this time. Let's change. Please enter the first number. Scanf %d address of number 1. Let me copy this code for number 2. Please enter the second number, address of number 2. Now I will do the swap. Swap is to change, okay? So number 3 will take the value of number 1. After number 1, we will give the value of number 2 to number 1, and after number 2 will take the value of number 3. Here we will print the values after swap. Here we have also to print the values before swap, just to see clearly the difference after and before swap. So we have printf number 1, it's equal to %d number 1. Here we have number 2. Number 2, we have to add /n to get new line. Number 2, it's here, number 2. Now we will write after swapping, so it's the same code. We will just copy this code. Number 1, the value of number 1 and the value of number 2. Let me add also /n. Now let's execute our program and see if we have any problem here. So please enter the first number, then the second number, 20. As a result, number 1 is 10, number 2 is 20. After swapping, number 1, 20, number 2 is 10. As you can see, we swapped the values. Let's here write something. Printf the values before swapping, here just to understand clearly, and here we have the value after swapping, just to get a good result. So here we have 10, 20. The values before swapping, number 1 is 10. Let's do another thing here. It's really important to organize our program. You will get used to organize the program step by step. So 10, the second 20. Now it's okay. The value before swapping, number 1 is 10, number 2 is 20. The value after swapping, number 1 is 20, number 2 is 10. So I hope you understand this different exercise and you applied all what we learned in this video. Thank you so much for listening, and subscribe to get notified for the next video, and see you in the next video. Thank you so much.